I'm Sarah Jackson, host of Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, a listening experience choreographed to help you elevate your internal communications to the pro level.
Just pick up the phone and just know your employees. And the more you know them, the more they will guide you about what it is that's truly important that you ought to be focused on. We all live in a world full of words, but numbers are what gets people's attention. Whether you like numbers or not, you got to figure out how to start gathering them and presenting them in a way that supports all of the arguments that you're making.
How do we continue to show that what we do has business value? There's an opportunity to look at the skills that we have, but also just the business and strategic acumen that people in our sphere are able to execute and deliver and measure effectiveness. The opportunity for the internal communicator to continue to deliver business value is only going to grow. There's a lot that we can do, and there's a huge opportunity to grow and elevate the role of the internal communicator. And I think looking at the employee well-being is a significant part of that.
Hello, folks. Those are two of the best experts in the business, Jason Anthoine and Mark Mohammadpour, and they are here to help me answer the one question that always stirs in an internal communicator's heart. What do our employees really want? You know, things are constantly shifting and moving and changing. So many conversations are happening within our industry right now. Most recently, there's been a great debate over if internal communicators should take on employee wellness efforts. So for this episode, I pulled on Jason and Mark to give insight into some of these tough to answer questions. Now, we'll get to Mark a little later in the episode to address the employee wellness debate, but I wanted to start with Jason. Jason Anthoine is the founder of a firm called Audacity. They help employees be informed, involved, and inspired by their companies. He's been in the business for over 30 years. And right before the pandemic, he organized an event called What Employees Want to capture the true desires of those we work with. Today, we're going to dive into his data that may surprise you and bring us back to some good old-fashioned common sense that could help us unearth if we're really connecting what is ironically a connected workforce. Now, we're going to jump into the part of my conversation with Jason where he's giving the backstory behind his event. Let's dive in.
We did a conference called What Employees Want here in Atlanta. We had about 100 folks in for a one-day conference to both review research results from a study that we have been doing and are still doing around exactly what it is that employees want from their communications and from culture and from employee experience. And the data was so compelling that I thought, well, we really need to make this, a real live event. So in January, we did that, and we had literally employees from different kinds of companies, different industries, different roles on stage in sort of live focus group setting, being asked questions about what it is they want, what it is they don't want, what they like, what they don't like. And it was just really gratifying to hear that, directly from the people that we're all trying to reach on a daily basis.
What did that research unearth? What do employees want?
And so when you look at the survey data from the global survey, we've got about 1,000 respondents so far. That it is eye-opening, particularly on certain questions. And one of my favorite ones is, there's a question that says, have you ever received a communication where you thought, do they really expect me to believe this? And the majority of the responses, 78% said, yeah, I've received some communications where I thought, I can't believe they really think I'm supposed to believe this. But then if you dig a little deeper, of the respondees who were in internal comms and HR, that number became 87%. So 87% of the people who are sending these things out sometimes don't believe what they're sending out. So that was really shocking and eye-opening to me. And there's, a lot of other examples in there about that. type of thing where we assume that they want, a better internet, or we assume that, really what we need is digital signage. We don't know any of those things. We feel those things because we're internal comms professionals, and in our heart of hearts we know that we need to reach folks, but we ought to at least be asking them what it is they would like and how they might like to be communicated with. And you'd be surprised at what some of those answers are and the value that it really creates for employees in the process.
Yeah. Well, and now even more, it feels like there's this increasing feeling demand that the employee, many who now are remote, now sit back and it might be in their subconscious, they might be voicing it, but they are what we're hearing from our listeners is, oh man, they are demanding this superior employee experience because they're comparing it now to these consumer grade experiences. Amazon knows me, Netflix knows me, Hulu, like, so then they, easily compare it to the company. They're like, what is this? This is a dinosaur. Like, what are you guys doing here? So, with that expectation, get us started here. What could be a first misstep that you see internal communicators making when they are trying to get rid of the assumption and to really know, what is my first step in trying to connect the connected. You mentioned on our prep call, we might be connected, but are they connecting? So where do you see people, trip up when they start, coming out of the gate doing this kind of work?
Typically, where they kind of trip up, and I just want to caveat that by saying it's not usually the internal comms people necessarily not knowing what to do or why to do it. Sometimes their hands are tied, because of their circumstances or their organization or their budget or their resources. So I completely understand that. So this isn't a knock on anybody in internal comms or HR for that matter, but typically what I see is some assumptions that get made based on incomplete data. So HR runs an employee engagement survey every 12 months, 18 months, whatever it is. And there's, either 70 questions or 75,000 questions, depending on which company it is. And that gives them some level of insight into who their employees are and what it is that they want to expect and how they are engaged or lack thereof. And then decisions get made based on, that data, which I don't know, I said earlier, I just don't know how accurate that data is when it comes to asking employees, are they engaged or not? Because I might say, yes, I am highly engaged, but it might not have anything to do with the purpose or the mission or the vision or the values or anything like that. And it may have everything to do that I have 3 kids in college and a mortgage. And so, of course, I'm going to tell you that I'm engaged because I don't want to lose this job. So I think one of the things that, happens is we start from some of this incomplete or inaccurate data and then build plans and messages and experiences and other initiatives on top of that, where if you really, get to the source of the issue, it's the data that we really ought to be focused on. So if you know that you're not really getting the usage of your intranet like you think it ought to be, or compared to some of the other people that might be your peers, there's a million reasons why that might be the case. And it won't necessarily be because the content's not any good, or we can't reach all the employees with it, or people are so busy they just don't have time to go there. There's a lot of other reasons why that could be the case, and hardly any of that ever gets surfaced if you're just doing a standard sort of check the box kind of survey. So to me, it's focus groups, it's one-on-one conversations, it's literally talking with your employees and really understanding who it is they are in the same way that marketing understands who your customers are. And then when you understand those things, then you can start figuring out what are the right channels and what are the right messages and where are the roadblocks and the barriers. So to me, it all starts with truly understanding who your employees are and getting as much real accurate data about that as you can.
So to kind of round out your data strategy, just not doing a survey, but adding some of those other things in there do I hear that correctly?
Yes. So, for example, you'll do a survey and you'll go in and report the findings to whoever it is you have to report to, and they'll say, that's great. But how do you know that that's true? it's a different answer for you to say, well, the reason I know that's true is because I've talked to 18 frontline workers at 10 of our plants, and all of them had the same thing to say about that. So if you have just the numbers, usually that's okay, but sometimes it's not. And if it's not okay, to be able to provide that color commentary around that because you truly have had those conversations and you truly understand who your employees are, that provides a level of confidence around those numbers that's very hard to argue with, because it's not just what the data is saying, and it's also not just your opinion. It's the combination of both those things plus the employees themselves telling you this. That's hard for people, to push back on, because it's it's not up for debate. This is actually, the data.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good tip. It really shines a light, I think, on the and validates the complexity, I think, of the internal communicator's role. But to have this sort of formula of there is an art and a science, and when you put the two together, it becomes so much more powerful. I love that you can provide a color commentary around the data story. I love that. Talk to me about okay, so I get the data and we now have this sitting in front of us and we know where we want to go. What would be the next step to that? We talk about maybe diving a little bit into your 2021 content strategy. What are people doing that have done this really well, taking that next step now that they know their audience?
I think the ones that are really doing a good job in that area have figured out the difference between capital C communications and lowercase c communications. Capital C communications are all the things that get produced at the corporate level. So all the stuff internal comms is doing, HR is doing, IT, whoever it might be. And typically in most organizations, that's about 10% of all the communications that are going on. The other 90% are these lowercase communications, and that's leaders to managers, managers to frontline supervisors, supervisors to employees, employees to employees, employees back up to leaders and managers. And it's that lowercase c communications that has the more that has the greater impact on the culture and the conversation and the employee experience. And so the organizations that are doing well with internal comms right now are spending a lot of time helping to shape those lowercase c communications. Some of those tactics include, well, we always distribute talking points to our managers and cross our fingers that they're going to use them. Most managers, don't have time in their day to do those types of things. Their plate is already full with whatever it is their day job is. And B, even if they do, most of them lack the confidence to be able to do the types of things that we in internal comms do in our sleep all the time. And so even if you are providing them with those talking points, they really lack the confidence to be able to have a meeting, to be able to conduct their own little huddle meetings or, mini town halls or whatever they might be. And so you've really got to focus on helping those leaders and managers, not just the frontline ones, but some who are fairly senior, understand their role in helping to drive the culture in the organization. And I know you've heard me say this a million times. Communications is not just a function; it's a leadership responsibility. And so they're never going to let us hire 3,000 people in internal comms, but we can turn 3,000 leaders and managers loose in the organization who can deliver all of those things in an effective way for us, and have a huge impact. So I've seen a lot of organizations, particularly since midsummer or so last year, really focusing on helping those leaders and managers have that type of confidence so that they can deliver not only the content to the employees, but also feedback and reactions back up from those employees. And so that seems to be really effective.
But wow, that is a great paradigm shift right there. So I don't want to move on until we make this point. It's a leadership function because Jason, so many of our listeners, they don't see themselves in that light. They see themselves or feel a feeling of I don't have influence. They do feel subordinate, and I think I would argue that's a blind spot. They would never think that the manager is lacking confidence in running a meeting. You're right, because they don't see themselves as
of course everybody can run a meeting. That's because you're good at that, right? Of course everyone can communicate because that's your God-given gift and talent that you and craft that you have honed. Not everybody has that. So I think to shine a light on that so that they understand you have a role, a teaching, a coaching, a leadership role to play. God, I think that's could be a blind spot with some of our listeners.
Well, I think it is, and it reminds me. There's a musician, Miles Davis, fantastic trumpet player, and Ed Bradley was interviewing him on 60 Minutes. I'm sure I'm dating myself now, but he was interviewing him. He was talking about the process that he goes through to write and play music, and he said, "Where do you get the inspiration from for how you play the trumpet and how that's so different from how other people do it?" And he goes, "I hear music all the time. I'm hearing it right now. When you are speaking, I hear music. Don't you?" And Ed Bradley just looked at him like, "What do you mean, don't I?" So Miles Davis doesn't understand why other people don't hear music like he does, because he is really good at it and that's his world. Same thing with us. We sometimes find it difficult to understand how somebody who might be an SVP in an organization truly doesn't understand how to communicate or lead a town hall, because we do it all the time. We hear that music all the time. They never hear that music, and some of them can't. That doesn't mean anything's wrong with us or them. It just means we each have, a different worldview. And so those are always opportunities to help them hear what we hear so that they can, improve those skills and have a lot more confidence. Doesn't mean they're ever going to be, perfect at it. We don't need perfect. We just need good enough. And if we can get them all to good enough, but let them hear the same music we can hear, boy, that's when we're really doing something.
I love it. I love that. Don't you?
No, it was shocking because when I saw that, I was like, I'm not hearing any music right now either. Something must be wrong with me.
I love that. So, what creative things have you seen out there? I mean, give us some tips of stuff that you've seen that people put in their content strategy. What's been some things that have caught your attention?
Well, everybody's been piling on with, Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams and Yammer and intranets and apps. And of course, all that's great. The more the merrier. You certainly need a strategy around those things, but the more options and choices you have, the more work feels like what your life feels like when you are not at work. Because you have, to your point earlier, Sarah, you have all of those options. I decide what I'm going to watch on Netflix or whether I have Netflix or Hulu. I decide what things I subscribe to, what mail comes in the house. And when it comes in there, it says, "Dear Jason." It never says, anything else. That it's that level of customization. And so all those things are important. But in the rush to connect all these folks and start doing a bunch of things, some of the things that I've seen that have really been interesting and unique is one idea is this reverse town hall. So typically, town hall is senior leaders talking about what's going on in the organization, and there's 15 minutes worth of questions at the end. Nothing wrong with that. Still do those; those are effective. The reverse town hall is literally that reverse, where employees are giving the update on the state of the business. Could be the whole business, could be one business unit, could be one plant, it could be one, line in one plant. And they're delivering the update on things they've accomplished and all of their wins and all of their challenges and what they need to be focused on going forward. And they're delivering that to the leaders of the organization. And wow, it is amazing what these employees are putting together and how they're sharing their own experience back up through the organization, and doing so in such a way that those leaders and managers are beginning to really fully understand the business that they may have been leading for 5-10 years in a way that they have never been able to understand it before. And so I love that concept around flipping the town hall on its head and totally reversing the roles there and letting the employees, give the update and share all of their accomplishments and challenges.
I love that. We talk about all this technology and everything at our fingertips. Many of our listeners are now They got all these channels, they gotta feed them all. They are asking the question, "How do we pull people to our communications instead of push?" And we've got lots of shows on the new tools and techs and trends and digital strategy and all that, but for the purpose of this conversation, can you walk us through maybe some old-fashioned ways we might have forgotten that could work during this time in our history?
Well, I think one of the most old-fashioned ways is direct mail to the home.
Mhm.
I remember when I was growing up, my dad was a, production line supervisor at a school bus factory. He worked 10 hours a day, 4 days a week, making school buses. And he had, I don't know, 8, 10, 15 employees who reported to him. Once a month in the mail, they would send the employee newsletter. And soon as I knew exactly what day that was coming in. Oh, it's Friday, the last Friday of the month. Employee newsletter is coming in the mail today. I would sit there and read that newsletter cover to cover because I was so interested in what Dad was doing all day long. He talks about work. I see school buses. I see what he does, but I don't really truly understand that. But I did once I read that newsletter every week or every month. And it's just a way to connect with employees and certainly their families in a way that's, adjacent to your regular corporate communications, but it's usually during non-work hours. And so it's an admission more than anything else that, hey, you have a life. And we want to be a small part of that when you're not at work. And so in this newsletter, we want to highlight the great things that folks are doing and all of our accomplishments, and really give some employee recognition there. And given all the digital channels and certainly all of the pressures that we're all under, even if you're not consuming digital content all day long because you don't sit in front of a computer all day, there's nothing more refreshing than something that has been printed and has your name on it and sent to the house that you can consume in your own time and you can share with your family. It just breaks through all of that clutter, and it has a different kind of positioning than just this constant barrage of digital content.
Well, I think it's a good point for people to rethink some of those things that used to work. We did an episode last year on decluttering your channels, and some that we channels that we did have, like one woman said their bathroom stall doors were a huge channel for their employees, and that one's taken away, right? Because no one's in the office anymore. So they talked about direct mail and mailing things, to help make their office better, and small gifts and tokens and swag, which they would have never thought about doing, a few years ago when everybody's coming in the office. So
Yeah, that she's right. That bathroom newsletter, we used to do one called Stall Street Journal. If you wanted to make sure anybody knew anything that was important, that's where you put it, because they would pay attention to that in a way that they would never pay attention to almost anything else we did.
That is so good. So, what's some things, we this is a show where we like to take off the polish. We always have to be so buttoned up, in our day jobs. And so I like to talk about hey, this is a mistake that I've seen make our failures, because that's where the biggest learning comes from. Give me some of the best ideas, worst ideas you've seen out there for people that have um tried to connect the connected.
Right? So I think one of the things that falls into that category is, Zoom meetings, team meetings, all these sort of video things that are going on all the time. They're fantastic until they are not. And they are not when there's too many of them, or just like, when you're in the office environment, there's too many meetings to go to. Meetings are great until they're not, and you have too many of them. It's the same thing with these things. They begin to lose their power and their impact the more that you do them. And so I've seen some organizations say, yeah, this is great, but on Fridays, we're not doing any meetings at all. Fridays is a day for you to do your work or explore new ideas or think about innovation. And as an organization, we're not going to have any internal meetings. And that's a way to just kind of free people from those things. I've seen other organizations, totally go in and revamp their intranet in record time, because now everybody's remote and this intranet needs to be performing at its highest level. The numbers for their intranet are the same as they were before they revamped it, and most of that has to do with the fact that they don't have time to do those things. They are so busy working on all of their initiatives and attending all these other meetings and things like that, that they just don't have time for that. And so when you think about what you're going to be rolling out and who's going to be consuming it and why all that's important, I think it's important to realize that people just don't have as much time. Not that they ever did, but they certainly don't have it now. And, if you look at most studies, employees have between 5 and 7 minutes a day that they might dedicate to capital C communications. If 5 of those minutes, is a long 2,000 word article or an 8-minute corporate video that you've sent out, now you've just used up all of their time for one day with one channel or one piece of content. So it feels like one of the defaults that I've seen that we might ought to take a look at cleaning up a little bit is just the volume of all the communications. We have all these channels and they're all fantastic and each of them work the way they should. But as a result, when you combine them all, it's just too much. There's just too much going on. Now, part of that, is somewhat our fault. Part of that is also the organization's fault, where we have to tell everything about everything all the time to everyone. That's not true. That's not true. People don't want all of that stuff all the time. So we have to also help leaders and managers prioritize what it is that they think they want to send out and come up with creative ways to repackage that stuff so that only the good stuff and the most important pieces of those things are getting through, because otherwise we're just bombarding our employees with stuff just because we can. That doesn't mean we should.
Circle Broadcast is a proud member of the Internal Comms Pro Collective. Now, you know how Jason is talking about the struggle to get the need-to-know information out that your employees must see, along with the other information that truly interests them. Well, Circle Broadcast takes out all that guesswork. Using Circle's cross-channel employee communications tool, you can be sure that employees are seeing the right message at the right time on the most convenient channel. To learn more, visit circle.com/ICP. That's CERKL.com/ICP. So we're getting ready to wrap up with Jason, but there is one part of our conversation where I had to highlight my all-time favorite quote that will help you push back on getting those one-off requests. Also, Jason gives us tips on how to get out from underneath the work so we can focus on what if instead of what is. And we hear from our internal comms wellness correspondent, Mark Mohammadpour, where he answers the question on whether IC pros should take on employee wellness initiatives and gives us 3 tips that you do not want to miss. Now let's jump back in.
Well, one of my favorite sayings ever, and again, I've heard you speak now over a dozen times. If you haven't heard Jason speak and he's ever speaking, make sure you go. I don't know if it's the Southern way about you, but you've got these sayings that come out every once in a while. And I'm like, we needed to hear that. Sometimes we just need somebody else to tell us that it's okay. We can say these things. But I remember one in particular was to ask your boss, you want grape juice or you want wine? Talk to me about that, that saying. It's the best saying ever.
Well, it happens to all of us. Somebody runs down the hall and says, "Oh my gosh, we got to have this thing, and it's got to go out, and it's got to be perfect, and we need it as soon as possible." And most of us, because truly we are servant spirits, and we want to be team players and want to keep everybody happy and do the right thing. Typically, we're like, "Yep, we can do that," knowing full well that that's going to take our precious weekend away and time with their family and friends or whatever it might be. And it's perfectly fine to push back and say, all right, I can do that, or I can do this. So, certain things take a little bit longer for us to be able to do to perfect. If you want truly a new intranet site or a new corporate video, I can't just create one in a minute. And so if you really want it to be good, To me, that's wine. And if you don't really care if it's good, that's grape juice. And the only difference between those two is time. The only difference between those two is time. So if it truly matters to the organization, then we've got to have the ability to create the wine that they say they want. Otherwise, they're just going to have to be happy with grape juice. Both of those are perfectly acceptable drinks. But whoever it is that's asking for it needs to understand the difference between the two.
Well, and I think it also um, it touches on your point of that's a leader. That's the leader part in us that we got to quit this default of being the yes woman or the yes man, and that's facilitating, kind of managing up to the manager to have them think through it a little bit better. Oh, what do I want? And is grape juice okay on this? It's facilitating that. I think that's such a great tip. Talk to me about.
Well, one more point on that, because when we think about that, a lot of us, particularly if you're, early in your career or even middle in your career, there's a reluctance to push back when a leader comes out and says, "I need this and I need it right now." But you have the ability to do that and the confidence to do that, no matter where you are, in your career and what stage you are in your career, because it's your job to help counsel them and to help do the best thing for them. Just like we talked about earlier, they can't always hear the same music that we can hear. So if they come to you and say, "I got to have this," the first question is never when, but it's why. Why do you need this? What are you trying to accomplish? Let me hear you say what that is, and then I can tell you whether what you're asking for is the perfect thing to do that, or there might be five other options that might be even better than that. But that's our responsibility to do that. And then the other way that helps it make it easier for us to push back is if we truly have a communication strategy. If we put a strategy together that's based on the overall business strategy, and we get our senior leaders to sign off on that, and they all agree that, yep, these are all the things we're going to do and the budget and the resources that we have to do it, then when people start coming to you with these one-off requests, you can let the strategy say no for you. All right, I appreciate you needing this, but 3 months ago we met and we all agreed that this is what the strategy was. What on this strategy would you like for me to not do so that I can do this for you? And if it's really that important and I can't not do these things, then what resources do you have for me to then go and get some outside help to be able to accomplish this for you? And then just be quiet and let them decide.
Yeah, that's so good. So help me here. I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but I can't help but to ask with, your experience in not only doing this yourself, but now helping so many internal communicators. How do I make this transition? We have talked so many times about the internal communicator being so busy churning out the work, and now even more with COVID-19. Is there any steps or practical things that I can share with the listener? If you are in this boat and you're thinking, I wouldn't even have time to put a survey together. I mean, first of all, they call you and you help them out. But besides that, how do I get out of this drowning mode so that I can think to do a survey? I can think about the strategy. I can think about the nuances of the art and science of this industry and building the relationships with the CFO so that I know, because I know I'm going to go make a business case for something later. How do I do all of this? It just feels like we listen to speakers and okay, that's great, but what I'm really facing, I don't know how to even get up from out underneath like the work that I have on myself.
That's a great question, and it's a constant struggle. Even when you have it figured out, that doesn't mean there's a stop to it. It's a constant, ongoing battle, and it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier when we were like, hey, we want to give these talking points to managers and let them hold some meetings and use these to share our content. Before we just assume that managers have time to do that, maybe we should just reach out and ask the managers what all is on your plate, and of those things, how can I help you get some of those things off your plate? Are you going to too many meetings? Are you having to produce reports that nobody's even reading? Or is there just a bunch of busy work? What can I do to help take some things off your plate, and so that those can be replaced with what I am asking you to do. And the same is true for us. There are tons of things on our plate right now that's just over the years have just shown up, and they keep showing up. And so in all the busyness of constantly cranking work out and getting it out the door, it's hard to step back and say, why are we even doing this? Why, for example, on the external side, why are we putting together a clip report of all of the media mentions that we've had? It takes hours and hours and hours, even when you have digital resources to do it. And you send it out. Does anybody read it? Does anybody even read that thing? 75 pages long. Is somebody already getting to page 73? I doubt it. So it's important to take a look at all the things that you're doing and trying to determine which of those things you don't need to do anymore. You can survey and ask about that. You can pick up the phone and call your employees. Hey, every Thursday we send out this Thursday tips email. Does anybody in your function read it? No? Okay, thanks. That's enough. That's enough right there, if you ask me, to not do it anymore. So once you start clearing some of that stuff away, then you can be replacing it with stuff that's more valuable. And that gets you out of constantly battling all the what is, so that you have time to focus on the what if. What if we trained our leaders to be better communicators? What if instead of dumping everything on the intranet, some of it actually got mailed to the homes? What if we had an employee mobile app that truly reached everybody where they are, not where we want them to come, but where they already are? It's hard to have time to think about what if you're constantly struggling with all the what is. And you do have a good bit of control of that what is, and it's perfectly fine to start questioning some of that stuff.
Yeah, but I love it's just kind of going back again. If this is an old fashioned route, sitting down, what's in my day, kind of taking stock of it. And then, like you said, picking up the phone and calling people. You don't have to be, a big old down and dirty, survey. It could just pick up the phone. We forget that we actually have that channel still available to us.
I know. When I was on the corporate side, when we were working in offices, somebody would say, "Oh, do I need to send an email to this person about this?" I was like, "No, they're just right over there. Just walk over there and give them a me-mail. You don't have to email them. Just show up as a me-mail and talk about it, and then it's done. Otherwise, it might take a week to get it resolved." Same thing here. Just pick up the phone and just know your employees. And the more you know them, the more they will guide you about what it is that's truly important that you ought to be focused on.
This is so good. So good. All right, last question here. If you could go back to your younger self, what warning or lesson would you give yourself in working in this world of internal comms, where it's headed through a pandemic, the turbulent year? Give us some insight of, what wisdom would you bestow upon your younger self?
Oh my goodness. Wow. So I would say a couple of things. One, um, we all live in a world full of words, but numbers numbers are what gets people's attention. Um, I've heard all of us say, I've certainly said it a million times, "Oh, I'm terrible at math. I'm terrible at numbers." And so as a result, we don't do any measurement. Well, the people down the hall in marketing and HR and everywhere else who are getting all the money and the resources and the team members, they have numbers. So whether you like numbers or not, you got to figure out how to start gathering them and presenting them in a way that supports all of the arguments that you're making, because other than that, it's supported by your opinion, and unfortunately, everybody has one. So they can't argue with the numbers. So you got to get comfortable with the numbers. That took me forever to understand and appreciate. I'm the worst person in the world when it comes to math. Time zones and trying to set meetings with people in different time zones is the worst. I don't know why. I just have a mental block doing that. But I'm never going to be successful if I don't help leaders understand the outcomes that we are accomplishing, not the outputs, but all the outcomes that we're driving the organization. And the only thing they understand is numbers. So you got to give them what they understand. And I think the second thing is that we all, love writing stories. We're at the heart of what we're doing is storytelling. Absolutely. But truly tell stories. Don't use a $10 word when a nickel one will do. All the content that we crank out, some of it feels like it's written for, third year, fourth year college, maybe PhD programs. Most people truly understand things when they are written at a sixth grade level. So whatever it is your complicated business strategy is for 21 or 22, or all these different synergies you're trying to achieve and everything the organization wants you to communicate about, you got to figure out how to tell that story. the way you would tell it to a sixth grader, because that's what people understand. That's how it resonates. And when you use those big fancy words, immediately people just tune out. And so the more it's told in ways that are relevant to those folks, the better.
Gosh, such good tips. Ones that we know should seem like common sense, but boy, as we just get our head down in so many weeds and all these things, I think it's this conversation is just such a good reminder that, of course, that it's like I would have missed it, and I think it's a great refresher, for our listeners out
And we're all
there.
guilty of it. I'm just as guilty of it as anybody else. Some CEO sends me something, says, I want to have a PowerPoint deck that has all this stuff in it. Okay. And I focus on making the PowerPoint deck pretty instead of looking at what the words are saying. And so, once you start kind of reimagining that, you realize I could really just put one really effective word on this slide on top of a beautiful picture that conveys that image. And that by itself will tell a story much better than 83 slides of Excel screenshots.
hmm Gosh, so good. So, where do you think we're headed? I mean, I know we've had this conversation about old fashioned type things to not forget, to kind of maybe pull those back off the shelf. It feels like we go back and forth. Like I said, employees they were excited about Zoom calls, and now our listeners are like, oh, they're so tired of Zoom calls. Now, what do we do? It feels like it's always constantly changing. How do we keep up? And what do you see for the future for this industry?
Well, I spend some time thinking about that and reading all the books I get my hands on. Yes, they still make books, physically printed books, and I get them all, and they're all stacked up right here, and I trip over them all day. But it's important to understand, all these other business concepts and what other industries are doing and how they're doing that and how that could apply to internal comms. And the thing that I keep coming back to is this concept around brand equals experience squared. So your brand equals your customer experience times your employee experience. And when you think about the customer side of the house, marketing is responsible for the relationship with the customer, and sales is responsible for the transaction with the customer. The two of them own customer experience. On the employee experience side of the house, HR has traditionally been responsible for the transactions with their employees, but no one has traditionally been responsible for the relationship with employees. We think sometimes HR should be, HR sometimes think they should be. But the reality of it is, HR is highly focused on making all those transactions as efficient as possible. So there's a gap there for who owns that employee relationship. And I think that's an opportunity for us in internal comms. Yes, we're going to continue doing the communication things that we do, but it's from a standpoint of how do we strengthen that relationship so that HR and internal comms are working together to own employee experience the same way that marketing and sales work together to own the customer experience. And to me, that feels like the future. It's not so much about platforms and apps and intranets and whatever else the latest technology is. It's about how can we build that relationship and partnership with HR so that the employees who choose to work here have done so because they're passionate about it, and everybody, they, the company, and us are getting something out of that relationship. That's when it's really going to make a difference.
Well, and I think that's a great entry point and a great point of view for the internal communicator to see themselves as such, that now they are on this level playing field with all these other departments and playing such a key role to create that employee experience, as opposed to I just write the emails and send it.
Right. That's right. I mean, there'll always be a role for that, and there'll probably be an internal comms. That's great. We need that. But we also need to embrace the role that somebody's got to own those relationships and truly understand and appreciate those employees. And we're glad to do it.
Mm, So good. Well, I can't thank you enough for having this good old fashioned conversation with me.
This has been delightful. I love it. I really appreciate it.
Now, before I let you go, I wanted to play a quick clip from my conversation with Mark Mohammadpour, founder of Chasing the Sun Health Coaching, whose mission is to empower communicators to become mentally and physically resilient so they can shine. Now, we've been talking about what employees want, and particularly what the data says employees want. The 2021 State of the Sector report indicated that increased focus on employees' mental health and well-being as the #1 trend for organizations in 2021. Still debating within your own team if you should take this on? Let's jump in and see what Mark says.
It's a great debate, and it's important to have a discussion about this. I think this particular topic is part of a larger discussion about the how we define the internal communicator and their role within an organization. Because of my PR background, I have always been a part of how do we continue to elevate the profession? How do we continue to show that what we do has business value? And as internal communicators, there are definitely a number of different roles that fit into that. There are some that are tacticians that are doing incredible jobs with writing and with being able to deliver key outputs to their audience. And there's always a place for that. I think as we think about the future of the internal communicator and its impact on the organization, there's an opportunity to look at the skills that we have, but also just the business and strategic acumen that people in our sphere are able to execute and deliver and measure effectiveness. And so for me, the opportunity for the internal communicator to continue to deliver business value is only going to grow. And as we've seen in the era of COVID, the work that we've done as internal communicators to lead, to deliver messages that have to be received by their employees that are talking about the well-being of the organization, the stability, the various aspects of working from home and all that stuff that takes so much mental and physical strength. And so for me, the opportunity to be able to have internal communicators have a role, whether that's leading or at least taking a significant part in communicating the opportunity for their employees to be mentally and physically well, is not only good for the internal communicator as an individual to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, but from a business standpoint, to be able to show that they've had a positive impact on those key performance indicators as it relates to the health of the business, as it relates to employee turnover, as it relates to retention, as it relates to the reputation of the company. There's a lot that we can do, and there's a huge opportunity to grow and elevate the role of the internal communicator. And I think looking at the employee well-being is a significant part of that.
Well, I just interviewed Tara Davis. She does the internal comms for the American Psychological Association. She's in your camp. She also, they have a 5 domains for a psychological healthy workplace, but her whole role, she thinks that is the cornerstone now, is this employee health and wellness. So knowing that you're in that camp, you've done lots of research in this area. Tell me about this, and maybe even a little, what does that look like for the internal communicator? What's their strategy to almost pick this sort of low hanging fruit, we might say, to say, hey, if you're looking to immediately provide business value, that employee wellness is an entry point, if you will, to get there. Me, I like to, what I want to leave with, what's, things that we could do. Go into that a bit from a high level strategy. And then I know you've got some tips that you've written about. I want to get into those as well, but high level, what do they do? Where do they start?
So if you look at employees, you look at a large majority, there's a lot of research out there that says a large majority of employees want their employers to ensure that the benefits offered have a meaningful impact on the quality of life. We also know that a large majority of employees have left jobs in the past because they frankly found better benefits or perks elsewhere. We also know that it costs a considerable amount of money to hire a new employee. The Society of Human Resource Management, or SHRM, says it costs on average $4,000 to bring on a new employee. And that's everything from recruiting to onboarding and everything in between. That's a hard cost. And if there's a role that internal communicators can do to partner with their HR counterparts in talking about all the great perks and benefits that are available to their employees, we can significantly improve the quality of communication. Because a lot of the employees, and think about yourself, you take a step back and say, how aware am I of my company benefits? Just anecdotally, people I've chatted throughout my career just don't have awareness of all the benefits. And that's not to put blame on the HR community at all. They are working so hard and so smart in putting this stuff together. But there is a definite skill set that internal communicators have to partner with them to talk to their employees about all the benefits that are available. And then from a hard business standpoint, there's an opportunity to show that impact and to further grow the presence and the importance of the internal communicator to business impact.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so you are recently featured, like I said, in PRSA's April issue of their Strategies and Tactics magazine, with you being their workplace wellness columnist. You came up with 3 tips, and I love leaving our listeners with 3 tangible things that they can do. Give us all 3.
Well, the first one is being very selfish, but I think ultimately of benefit to the company. It's audit your own activity and lead by example. So, how aware are you as an internal communicator of your company's benefits? Are you aware of the medical, dental, vision, wellness, your PTO? I've talked a lot about how we as Americans do not use all of our PTO. There's a lot of research out there that says that. And for the PR professional and internal communicator, we don't take all of our PTO. What's our policy? So really auditing that and really discussing that with your HR team as kind of an anecdote as far as what are the opportunities that you can partner with them to help make sure that employees are aware of all those benefits. I think the other big thing, and you and I talk a lot about this as well, Sarah, is pilot, test, and iterate. So we don't necessarily need to execute a strategy right away that is enterprise wide in helping to increase awareness of the benefits and ultimately people taking advantage of them. Let's start with the department. Let's start with a particular area within the organization that we might see needs some help. Perhaps it's a part of the organization that has a significant amount of turnover. Maybe there's a lot of feedback about unawareness about perks and benefits, that there needs to be some sort of streamlining of communication to be able to change perception. So start small, test and iterate. And then the third is to demonstrate your results. And I think this is always a challenging one, but I really want to push our internal communicator to think about this. What was the amount of turnover of your organization? How much has been impacted positively recently? Were more employees using wellness benefits year over year? I think anytime we can ethically, and I really want to emphasize this, Sarah, ethically talk about the work that we've done and how much it's impacted the business from an employee standpoint, a reputation standpoint, a turnover standpoint, the opt-in of benefits, those types of things where we play a role in partnering with HR is a big win. And I don't want us to miss out on that. Now, obviously, we have to have genuinely and ethically played a role in that. But if we were to audit the work that we do, I think we play a role more than we realize. Let's highlight that. Let's acknowledge that to our bosses. Because especially at the C level, the CCO, the CMO level, the CEO, they may not have full awareness of the communications department's role in that. And so we have to toot our own horn. And this is one way in which we can do so and fully demonstrate business impact.
I love it. I love the 3 tips. I know, also interestingly enough, Cassandra Rose, and we'll link this in our show notes, wrote an article about this coming from a diversity, equity, and inclusion, that a lot of minorities don't take advantage of their benefits as well. So there's another reason to, take that opportunity. Such a great way for internal communicators to have that entry point to develop the relationship with their HR business partner. I love the 3 tips. We'll link the article in our show notes. And Mark, what do you got going on these days? Tell us if people want to get in touch with you, connect with you. Shameless plug here. Tell us where we can find you. What are you up to?
Well, again, I am the founder of Chasing the Sun Health Coaching. My mission is to empower communicators to become mentally and physically resilient so they can shine. It's been an honor over the last year and a half since I launched this company to work with individuals and with organizations on how making sure that they are prioritizing their well-being in a way that is actionable, practical, and most of all, relatable to this audience. It's been an honor since running teams from the PR standpoint for the last couple of decades to be able to do this full time. So not only do I do one-on-one coaching, I host corporate workshops with companies, and it's been really fun seeing that evolve. And I also create a content series for organizations that maybe their employees don't have time to sit for an hour or two, but need very short, actionable 2 to 3 minute videos on a number of topics, everything from how to properly stretch to nutrition to deep breathing and everything in between. It's been fun working with companies to ultimately help provide that content that shows that they care about their employees, that they want them to be safe and healthy and well, which ultimately makes them happy and makes the employer happy, and then helps make the internal communicator happy because they are continuing to show their business value to their bosses, which is why we're all here, Sarah.
Yes, I love it. Well, Mark Mohammadpour, again, I'm officially calling you our IC Health and Wellness Expert Correspondent. Thank you so much for hopping on today and talking about the debate. And again, 3 tips. We will put them in our show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me. It's an honor.
Well, there you have it, folks. Now you know what the data says about what employees want. We'll have a link to both our guest websites and how to follow up with them in our show notes. Stay with us next week as our journey to uplevel your internal communications to the pro level continues.
Internal Comms Pro, the podcast, is produced by the Internal Comms Pro Collective and proudly supported by the Circle Broadcast Suite, an entire suite built for internal communicators. Learn more at circle.com. And don't forget to visit www.internalcommspro.com/show notes for our free resource guides. Thank you for listening.